He that would make his own liberty secure must guard even his enemy from oppression. For if he violates this duty, he establishes a precedent that will reach to himself. Thomas Paine. Hello again. I don't want to make this long, but I think it always ends up being long. But it's just kind of an introduction to all the topics that I do want to cover in the next couple of live streams, and go a little bit in depth as much as I can. It's not going to be covered in its entirety in one live stream, even if it was like 20 live streams, but it's just to talk about it, see the written history accounts of it, and again we have to take that for a grain of salt, but just saying, okay, this is what the victors or the people who edited and published the history of what some person or a written account was saying, and then eventually, you know, maybe sometime a different account of it shows up, either in a buried somewhere or found somewhere, that seems to be suppressed or censored by the people who don't want everyone else seeing it. Anyways, starting off, let's talk about censorship. Again, my main YouTube channel is currently down as far as live streaming, based off of the Isaac Cabby Reveals Hollywood Pedophilia and More. Due to harassment and cyberbullying. All I did was just upload the video that he did where he accuses people, and, you know, make up your own mind. At least that video is there for people to listen to and watch. Make up your own decision whether or not you believe him or not. But some people just want to know what actually happened, because time, the concept of time, basically, things reveal themselves. Anyways, that's why my backup channel is doing the live stream. I do live stream on different formats: DLive, Twitch. What else do I go? Periscope. You know, most of those don't hold my videos. Some get taken down. Sometimes Periscope doesn't even they'll block me, and I'll get no notification that I am actually being blocked. Okay, let's start moving on to the topics. Now, the first one is revolutions, and what's interesting that I'll probably get into is Maximilien Robespierre. He's a French lawyer. He's the one who led the French Revolution. And what's written about him, of course, can be from the standpoint of the ones who are against him. I mean, think of every deist that's come about, aside from like a few individuals that have done at least some contribution that can't be denied, right? They'll just focus on those parts. Just look at Thomas Paine. Everyone knows about Thomas Paine as founding father, you know, written books of common sense. He was one of the writers of the Constitution of the United States. What you don't know about him is that he was a deist, that he wrote other books like The Rights of Man and The Age of Reason. Those were very volatile books, even to the founders and his so-called friends, if you could call them that. He's betrayed, supposedly, by George Washington and Maximilien Robespierre. Eventually, Thomas Jefferson came in to help, along with the other few individuals. And when he died, supposedly, there's only 6 people at his funeral. So things that you don't really know about. And they won't teach about Thomas Paine. Now, we go to Maximilian Robespierre. And now I'm talking about revolutions. Revolutions, what makes a successful revolution? Basically, ones that still exist today. United States is one. Is it really successful? Well, we just had that one, and we didn't really revolutionize anything else once it's been corrupted and all the faults have been discovered. Because I am pretty technical, think of it, so my analogy may stem from that. So imagine that there's a software product or even a hardware product, version 1.0. So imagine that our form of governing ourselves, the Constitution, we're still in version 1.0. Maybe there's a couple of bug fixes, but not too many. We're maybe on version 1.0, 213. I don't know, make up a number. But basically, we haven't gone to version 2.0. Maybe 2.0 could have been the Civil War. So, but really, it didn't make huge adjustments to just what the ideals were for the founding fathers, especially the deists. You can call some of them Christian deists, that's fine, but basically that the equality of everyone, even expanding to if you want to get to nature and all the animals, the essential rights of living things. So interesting, just some of the quotes that that's being just shown on, I guess, Wikipedia or Google. I mean, this is a nice one. The secret of freedom lies in educating people, whereas the secret of tyranny is in keeping them ignorant. I'm sure we could find some good stuff about him. I think if you want to look upon him as an irony, his nickname was the Incorruptible. So he couldn't be corrupted. Except he's attributed to being as leading the reign of terror back in the French Revolution. And so basically he's charged with executing, again, he's a French lawyer. He's accused of executing all the previous people who reigned in France's monarchy without trial. And even a couple of people who were part of the revolution at the top, he was. So he, just kind of reminds me of that quote that you will probably think about too, is like from The Dark Knight, one of the Batman movies in the trilogy of The Dark Knight. Like, you either become a villain. I don't remember that quote. Let me type it in. Dark Knight quote, become a villain. You either die your hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. But I don't see Maximilian Robespierre as actually having done that. But we'll get into that in more detail, and I'm going to do a little bit more research. So, one of the things with Maximilian Robespierre is he was a good friend of the founding fathers. He was a good friend of Thomas Paine until he was betrayed. He betrayed Thomas Paine and was going to execute Thomas Paine because Maximilian Robespierre wanted to behead France's king at that time. But since and therefore and there's this story of Thomas Paine being lucky that he opened the door. He asked for the door to his cell to be partially open so he could get some fresh air during the day of his execution, or the night before. And what they used to do is they marked X's or whatever it is that mark was in front of the cell doors, so the next day the people who were gonna be executed, they can see that mark is in front of the door, and so they know who to take. But since his door was slightly open. It was on the outside of the door, not the inside, which doesn't make sense because they would probably still put it on the inside. Anyways, the people the next day overlooked it, and he didn't get executed the following day when he should have. And somewhere around 3 days later, Maximilian Robespierre was executed himself. And therefore Thomas Paine was able to get free. Of course, it took years for him to become free because George Washington wouldn't help him, and Thomas Jefferson eventually helped get a pardon for him and get him back to the United States. So here's kind of the idea of revolution. As far as a successful one, what should happen? I think the person in charge, because if it's a revolution and you are a general, you're a commander of some forces, and you overtake a government, that is called a coup, right? A military coup. And just like Napoleon Bonaparte, he led a coup against not Maximilian Robespierre, but there's 5 people in charge after the French Revolution, and basically Napoleon Bonaparte led a coup against them and ended up, starting his Napoleonic era. But so a lot of those revolutions don't stand up till the present. If you want to, we're going to talk about past, present, future, if it exists as the traditional materialists, I guess, say it does. All right. So it didn't stand up to the test of time. Now, what is the correct thing to do? I mean, the only exception seemed to have been George Washington. George Washington led the United States Army. Before it was the United States, and during the Revolutionary War, and he eventually became president. But it wasn't like a king; it wasn't a dictatorial position. So that's one step to do. Another step is there's another person that's very attributed, and I used to remember his name, very similar to George Washington, and basically you can look it up, and I probably should too, just so I can remember the name. Is generals who conquered but did not rule. I know I spelled it wrong. Conquered. I'm trying to remember his names. It was during the it was somewhere in Rome. So George Washington is attributed to it, and the only other person was I forgot his name. I'm trying to find out who it was, but basically they called upon this general to help save Rome. He saved Rome, and then he just went back to doing what he was doing, like being a farmer or whatever it is that he was doing. I can't remember his name. I've said it, I mentioned it once before, a long time ago. But basically, I'll probably try to remember that for the in-depth video. All right, so majority of revolutions you don't become a dictator by being the general. And of course, Julius Caesar, of course, had the same thing happen to him, right? Now, here's the other thing. If you lead a revolution, do you kill off all of the previous reigning government, whether it's monarchy or dictatorship or like a democracy, republic, or whatnot? And of course, there's not many republics out there, actual republics. do you kill them off, right? That's, I think Thomas Paine was like, no, let's not do that. Obviously with the quote of his. But what do you do with them? Do you exile them? Do you keep them around but not in power, or do you put them in certain positions of power still, but not with military power? I mean, if the written accounts of like Genghis Khan are true and stuff like that, basically he would conquer different towns and villages and countries and whatnot, and still have them in power, just become vassals to his reign. And that's difficult to do unless you are a vast military superpower, and things are quite different now than they are back then. The other thing is, if you do become, again, like I was saying, someone who leads a revolution, becomes free from some form of control, whether it's government or religion or both. Most of the time it's both. Don't basically don't take a position of power. Just leave. Just don't be engaged in whatever government is formed or non-government, maybe. I mean, at some local level with no power, sure, I think that'll be fine. But so basically, it's tough because then you don't know what the freedom that people have, whether they are going to form another government or some dictatorship. You have to still say, hey, we took down something bad in order to be free. Instead, why do you guys keep going for this one-upmanship, I guess you could call it, and just keep on wanting to assume the same power that the previous system had? So definitely it's a hard and difficult fight. And it's always been, it seems, from if there's meaning of life, purpose of life, I guess you could say, one that's stood the test of time since the beginning of time, it's always been those the fight against freedom, the fight for freedom, and against those who are against freedom, the ones who want to be free themselves but control others. That has always been the case. It's still to this day occurring, and it's always, and just kind of like the Greeks and a lot of other early civilizations, it's always been about freedom and liberty, free will, you could say. Like, I think what's interesting is when I listen to a lot of people who make videos about the esoteric and occult, and they go into liberty and they're saying liberty doesn't mean freedom. No, liberty does mean freedom. It's free choice, freedom to do as one chooses. But I guess that you can see that's I don't know where they're getting that idea from, that it's not freedom. They could see it as how the military views the word liberty, right? It's not freedom to do what you want, freedom to do what you're allowed to do by some authority. They'll quote it as that, but liberty, as far as the etymology is concerned, has always been about freedom of choice, freedom to do what you want, free will, all of that stuff. And so the state of being free, and it's always been the case, and still going today. And it's just, how long is that game gonna keep going on, right? And at what sacrifices, what evil, what devilry will you go in either direction, whether to suppress it or to establish freedom? That's the entirety of revolution of man, basically, of humans. I just think it's very interesting. And the thing is, being free from a government entity is one thing. I think it was easily done, or not easily done. It was very difficult to do, but it was successfully done. Let's just say that in the United States and America, because there was not a lot of power. It was a remote war, basically. You've got one country that's fighting a very long distance away, and without many allies. Basically, the United States understood the need to having allies to fight against the British, and therefore recruited the Native Americans and the French. Probably they tried recruiting as many others if you look into it, but British really didn't have many allies to prevent the uprising that occurred. Now, if it would have happened in Europe, now Europe is a different case because there's a lot of like backroom dealings, hidden types of established allyship based upon religion. Like the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, the Rome, the Vatican, Jesuits, whatever you want to call it, Catholicism. Those allyship remain in place because you've got an army where all the priests have some form of power for some government, especially monarchy, because monarchies establish the authority that they're representatives and chosen lineage of some deity. And so the church can always help them in all these different ways, whether it's from monetary or military, whatever type of support. So you're going to have a lot of allies going against whoever's just trying to take over. You can see that during the Napoleon Bonaparte's reign. Now, there's also the concept of money. That became supposedly a big problem with the founding of America because they were broke. And so there was just, you could see that there's just a lot of issues with it. Now, how does money in the first place become utilized by, say, culture or civilization or government or whatever it is? Because there's two ways to start. You can either demolish the previous currency and institute a new one, and some type of authority, some type of centralization ignores, it has to support the refusal of accepting the previous coin in order to establish the new one. The problem is, if it's backed by something, it's still worth it in different other countries. And your new currency may not be accepted by the other countries. So that becomes a difficulty. Or you create the new currency, but don't try to demolish the other one. The other one is still allowed. But how do you get people to accept a new currency instead of just still using the previous currency? Now, all of that is just negated if all of that is negated if it's controlled by an international centralized system of currency, bankers, the banking system, however you want to call it. But the way to actually go about and instituting a new currency that's not controlled by that system is gonna have to be where you can only buy certain goods, products, whatever it is, with the currency that you want accepted. So if the United States had their own currency and they had some sort of resource or goods that like Europe or Asia or whatever couldn't readily give out, well, basically you establish the currency of the new currency of that civilization or that country, whatever government, whatever it is. And the only way to get that resource is to have people invest in your currency. So that's kind of how money is can be reestablished to be not in the hands of those who can magically create it. I mean, money is a weird topic because when you look into all these corporations that keep losing money, we see it now even with movie theaters and the whole conspiracy of establishment of New World Order type of thing is they should be bankrupt and out of business, but they keep getting bailed out. But they don't change their strategy. They don't change how they run their organization. It keeps coming out with the same products, yet ends up being successful. Not by any goods that they sell, right? They're losing money, but because they're following that narrative, the propaganda of the establishment of some sort of control group, they remain in business. They're okay. It's like you don't really see the record books of it. They lose millions or even billions, but they're fine. Basically, you don't know who the bankers are. You don't. Maybe like your local bank or something like that, but you don't know who prints the money. It's just a big fraudulent system. It's basically just bookkeeping. So as long as you have your own bookkeeping, you can establish your own currency. But to legitimize it, you need to have some sort of resource where no other country, government, region can provide that resource, except for the currency that you're trying to legitimize. And so money is going to be a big topic, and how to wrest it from the control system. That way we don't have to go into some type of barter system. Go back to a barter system. And I think this was something that the founding fathers were really trying to establish, that they really had a lot of arguments for and against. Because I think a lot of because think about it, the wealthy really had a big say in the formation of the United States and what they were still allowed to do. I mean, this is one of the reasons why slavery was still a big deal, and why even the people who were against slavery and wanted to abolish slavery at that time couldn't, because, well, they just wanted to make sure that they can form the treaties between the different colonies and prevent the revolution from collapsing. And in order to do that, they also needed resources, and in order to sustain an economy, to ward off any further attacks, to get the country back to the British ruling. So what resources did they have at the time? I mean, the only thing that they had was slaves. That was like, if not the top, one of the top things that they had. So but they couldn't really establish currency for that because every other country could have slaves. They can have slaves brought to them, probably cheaper since it was even further distance. So therefore, it was not a commodity where every other country out there is going to say, yeah, well, we can have our own slaves from this, so we don't really need your currency. But now that there's been a lot of technologies and a lot of precious metals and stuff like that that can be mined, and unfortunately, there's still the availability of moving to a non-centralized form of currency. So that's one thing that's going to have to be dealt with the revolution is unfortunately how goods are transacted and traded for and all of that stuff. Now, let's see. Deism has always been a big one. Again, the idea of deism is the equality, the religion of nature. Basically, everyone is equal. Everyone is free. That's just how everything naturally is. The other aspect that people say deism is the aspect that there is a deity or God or Tao or source, whatever you want to call it. But after the creation of it, well, unfortunately, yeah, that deity or whatever you want to call it really has no stake in the world. For example, excuse me, whoever the creator was, just however much you pray, it's not gonna come true or help you or anything like that. People have been trying and doing it for a long time, and of course things don't happen. So there's that concept, and that concept can go as far back as Gnosticism. What's interesting though, there's a lot to cover with deism, and the war against deism still exists today, since the Enlightenment age, from numerous individuals, and basically you'll see deism as people who support deism has always been about freedom from government, freedom from religion. They allow the freedom to, if you wish to form government, but those people who are within that government should have say whether or not it's legitimate to them or not, and stuff like that. Same thing with religion. You can see as the founding fathers really held to the ideals of deism, if not the religious aspect, at least the philosophical one. Even Christian deists at that time, ones who are really either Protestant or Catholic, almost none were Catholic deists, but Christian deists, Protestant ones, did support it. And again, it's the philosophical side of deism and not necessarily the religious natural side, as most consider pagan or heretical, etc. So deism is really ties into all of it as far as freedom is concerned, revolutions that occur, who the revolutions are up against, and it's always been the ones who have assumed a form of authority and force and control over others. And that's still the fight today, and it's a new nuance. Somewhere in the early 20th century, if not mid 20th century, controlled opposition was a thing. It's definitely a thing now, but it's very, very refined, and it's almost to a weird point of like, you can't trust anybody type of thing. And like things are weird because it's almost surreal. It's like, why would someone really spend so much effort into doing bad things, whether it's just for maybe it's personal kicks, maybe it's to become famous for just being a troll, to cause a lot of harm, mental harm, whatever, some form of that controlled opposition, whether if it's somehow it supports the control systems to making sure that people don't really like freedom. No, it's not that. We have to redirect it. People really don't like bad people, especially people who are hypocrites and say, look, there's strategy involved. It's a lot of strategy that needs to be taken into account. No person who rules, who assumes a form of authority, who wants to get people to support them and whatever they say goes, says, I'm evil. I worship the evil one. Therefore, you're going to want me to rule you. It's always the people who, whether they are evil or not, they assume that they are the good ones, that they are chosen by the highest almighty good God, deity, whatever. And therefore, if you don't follow them, you are the evil one. So there's that big inversion that occurs. And of course, if you dive deep into esotericism, you're going to see that the inversion of things has always been a thing of the control systems. And that relates to symbolism, which we will get into symbolism too. Just think of all the co-opted symbols that religious institutions have had. Not even religious ones, but even governmental religious ones. I mean, just think of the swastika for the Nazis. They definitely reversed it and took it to themselves. And they're not saying that they are the evil ones, that they have power, but that they were the perfect race. Every other race wasn't, and they were the right. That was the purity of, and just establish a pure line of humans type of thing. So again, even the Nazis, they did not say that they were the evil ones. They did it in the name of good and God and etc. So there's always a lot of lying. There's a lot of hypocrites, and you can tell the hypocrites by their lying. Basically, their actions don't line up with what they say, especially what they say that they're going to do and what they do. So that's one of the fights that you can easily see against those who support freedom and those who don't. And who are they supporting? Easily with that stalker, narcissist, Tokyo Shemp, the anonymous troll, self-admitted troll, etc. You can see that he definitely does not support freedom, does not support opposition of the established rule, the control systems, just by the actions. His words might be otherwise, but still, it's not how you would want to handle the freedom that you want for everyone. Even like his idea of freedom is for him to be free to do whatever he wants to those he dislikes or hates. I am one of those, and to limit the freedom of me. But as Thomas Paine put, even your enemies, he's my enemy. A weak one at that, but still, he is my enemy. But I want him to be free to do as what he does, and if it affects me and my livelihood, my philosophy, my family, my personal body, it will be defended. So that's the thing, is you have to be very vigilant. You have to be on guard and counter anything that could come up So basically, be more disciplined than the other person, and that takes dedication, and of course, that takes a lot of willpower. And any type of battle, war, fight, however you want to call it, it's almost never about strength or force. Willpower is the biggest thing. And usually the ones who have willpower are the ones who are the most free, and therefore they're the most disciplined and have the most power, which they refrain from using. So it's an interesting reason as to why we've always seen freedom as the losing side, because it's always going to the part where there's some boundaries, some things that you won't cross. Because to cross it is you're just perpetuating the same thing in just a different form, and every substitution for that different form is still the same thing. So again, it's always going to be losing, but never lost. Now, what's interesting with Catholicism and atheism is that Catholic Church, the Pope, and etc. support atheism. And I just find it interesting because I'm thinking back, science is highly regarded, at least scientism, by these very religious organizations that have very big control system in place, like the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope, the Vatican, etc., Jesuits. They're like, yeah, atheism is okay. And I got quotes from the Pope. It's better to be an atheist than a bad Christian. Better to be an atheist than a hypocritical Catholic. It's just like all the support for it. I looked on Google. I was just curious how many atheists converted to Catholicism. And maybe I should type in reverse Catholics who convert to atheism. But basically, it's a very big list, a lot of views, and a lot of famous people who end up being converted, a lot of these atheists, to Catholicism. And I always wonder, it's always these famous individuals or ones who want to become more famous, more earn more, I guess, things like that. Heck, you'll even see, I think I saw one with Stephen Colbert, and he's again attempting to convert Bill Maher. Watch, I'll bet you one day Bill Maher will convert to Catholicism. Yeah, here's one. Stephen Colbert's conversion from atheism back to Catholicism. And it keeps going and going, and you can kind of see that occurring. But you won't see support, and you'll never have seen support of the same Catholics in the church, the Catholic Church, with Deism, nor will you ever see it with Gnosticism. I don't think you'll even see it with Taoism. But basically, nothing as to how they support atheism, which is interesting and something that I want to do more research in. If you want to do more research on it too, because you would think that still the idea of deism and Gnosticism and Taoism is like, you want to make sure you are worshiping the best and foremost deity, and the make sure you're like, if you're gonna worship or you're gonna believe or you're gonna follow or you're gonna whatever it is, that it's gonna be good, right? And that's basically what deism and Gnosticism and Taoism are attempting to do, is to find their way to that. And how are you going to do that? Well, the one key word in almost all of them is nature. Although certain types of Gnosticism, and again, Gnosticism is a big, vast thing to look into. they all have different ideas of what Gnosticism is, and that's where it gets very difficult to cover, because they'll say, no, nature is actually bad, no, nature's evil, and the ones who created nature were evil and bad and all this other stuff. But the focus really isn't on nature, but the one who created nature actually was ignorant and all this other stuff. So Gnosticism, even though if you take that stance on it, the Catholic Church should probably support that stance, but still as a whole doesn't support Gnosticism at all. So they reject Deism, they reject Gnosticism, Taoism, a couple other types of definitely, like, paganism is not a good thing. And what is paganism in its broad general concept? It's nature worship, right? They'll be against shamanism and animism and a bunch of other things. And so it's just very interesting that the one thing that they do support is just the non-belief of any type of higher consciousness being or something or other, right? It's like, why is that? That's just very, very intriguing to me. It's like it's just another puzzle to look into, another rabbit hole. So you'll see me cover that in a future topic, and where I'm going to be doing a lot more research on, which you should too as well. There's so much, like the history of atheism. I don't know. I just feel like there's just so much to go over. But as far as like, it feels as though to the Catholic Church, atheism is very much akin to their support of science, in that the majority of scientists have been Jesuits and Royal Society and stuff like that. And it's very, I just find it very interesting, because I think it's just, if you're going for the inversion, right? Have people worship something that they know is not quite the highest, not quite the goodest. If that's not even a word, but you know what I mean. Is to invert things, lie, do the opposite, and saying like, this is important when it's really not important, or that's not important when it is really important. These types of things, that's why you've got the term profane very much in use, and you even got different terminology for it for different types of religions that have these mystery cults, mystery religions, mystery schools. That's what it's called. And I just think it's, basically what science is a way to identify nature and how nature behaves and call it a certain thing. But if they're the ones who are dictating how nature behaves, they can interpret it however way they want, even if that's not how it actually behaves. And therefore, you can't find the truth of things within nature, as in a lot of these philosophies. I really wouldn't call them religions. Even though they'll say Deism is a religion, and many people say it's a religion, I think it's more of a philosophy, very much in terms of Taoism and even Gnosticism to some extent. Again, Gnosticism is just so varied that it's difficult to just pinpoint, like brush in just one. What's that term? In one brush. But anyways, so that's just the prelude to all these topics that I'll be talking about, either conversing with someone, some guests, special guests, just on my own. I do like to tie things in. I mean, the research I did with Adam Weishaupt, the research I did with authority, the Alumbrados, with the Illuminati and Deism, along with Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson and Bishop James Madison, along with Adam Weishaupt, and a lot of that will tie in, and basically how the opposition is always against some type of freedom. Basically, it's just somehow, for some reason, if you're talking about the control mechanisms that are in place, control systems, it's always about some form of authority where they are in that position to speak for the authority. Thus, you must follow. Otherwise, you are evil. You are heretic or evil. I don't know, whatever excuse that they want. And thus, the majority of people who witness that goes, oh yeah, definitely against that control system. They're definitely like terrorists or like Satan worshippers, devil worshippers, or all that stuff, right? But they never think that, hey, the way that they act, it seems the opposite. They seem to be more of the devil worshippers they accuse others of. The others never really accuse them of being what they accuse others of. It's just like, hey, you really have no authority. I'm not gonna follow you. You could try to force me to do it, but I'll just resist and fight back, and there you go. And then you've got the control systems going, oh, you're gonna fight back. Oh, you're the aggressor. I'm the victim. It's like, see how everything just gets flipped. And we'll see when we see that today in society. It's like somehow the aggressor becomes the victim, and the system supports that, and therefore the actual victims, well, things don't go very well for them. There's just so much to tie in. It's like, where do you start? So we just have to start somewhere and somehow get it's like looking at the big picture. It's like you're looking at a small picture, right? It's just really thin, whatever it is, small picture. And then you just kind of look at a couple and you like tie those in. You kind of see the bigger picture. But when you see the bigger picture, it's like there's just so many things, so many distractions involved. But you'll spot something very curious. And then you're going to zoom in on something after you see the big picture. You're going to see something that you never saw before, you never understood or realized before. And it's like, huh, that is crazy. But there's very small number of people doing this. And the number of people who are doing this do not get a lot of recognition. A lot of people who understand where they're coming from, and it is very simple. Basically, a lot of people want to take on against these individuals and saying that they're the evil ones, they're the state sponsored, they're the control system, they're the ones who can whatever. The actions always speak for themselves. So it's always a constant struggle. It's always a constant fight. You're never gonna win, right? The fight for freedom can't be won, because if you're free, you've already won. Do you see that point? The concept of freedom. If you really are free and you're fighting for freedom, well, you're free. You've already won. The way to lose is to not be free. Is to give up that freedom, right? Therefore, you've lost. So basically, you're always winning if you're free. They can't take anything away from you, because if you're really adamant about freedom, you'll die free. The only time you die not free is when you finally give in and you lose. So, you gotta reverse that thinking that most people have, is like, we're a slave to the system. No, we're a slave to the system if you are a slave to the system and you've given up on freedom. If you understand that you're already free, you're always free until you give up that freedom, then you've lost. So therefore, you've always been winning. Just gotta think of things in that perspective, and I think a lot of people don't. And I think that might be another thing that I might do a topic on, just freedom in itself, and try to get people to understand that's how things really are. Like, slavery exists if you accept being a slave in whatever form or fashion. If you think the control systems out there control you, well, then yes, you are controlled, and therefore you've lost. So the state of mind, another kind of important concept, although it is a concept, is very important to your well-being as well. The only thing that they can really take away from you in, if you want to call it this life, this reality, etc., is your freedom, is your will, your free will. To fight against that, you have to have willpower. You never abuse your willpower because it is always your will, but to abuse power is to go against your will. And will has to do a lot with a lot of symbolism, I guess you could say. Concepts and words. Words are symbols in themselves, letters as well. But just to drive this home, will, freedom, power, wisdom, they're all variations of the same form, if you want to use form in that very Greek way. So, and that's another problem, is just so many different terms based on where you're starting from. Like, most of my starting from is from the Western religious point of view. Where I'm trying to do is tie in the Eastern philosophical view with the Western philosophical view that has been intertwined with, and use terminologies that aren't conformed to the religious aspects of things. The only problem is every time you come up with a term that's not the concept of what that terminology is, the religious terminology, you use the philosophical terminology of it, the translation is always going to be towards that religious definition of it. So words, like a lot of philosophers have talked about, words are themselves a trap. It's another vicious circle, which I talk about again. Another thing to understand the awareness of vicious circles. This is an important video, that one. So all of these things, ideas, concepts, whatever it is that I still use, really have to focus on some key, I hate to say words, but the key words, right? Because it's just that constant thought, whichever direction you want to go, the way of the Tao, just the Tao. It's everyone has to find their own way. It's the only way that's always been described, but it doesn't get through to people. But again, I think a lot of people, they don't change until something changes them, and then they want to. You'll start, if it's you who somehow are still listening to me after an hour. Gonna start doing your own research, really looking into things. experiencing the alternative consciousness that's consciousness of here, and the ideas sprouted forth by psychologists as to the limitations of consciousness and their way of defining nature: conscious, subconscious, unconscious, super, the the ego, and a whole bunch of stuff. You know, it's the way to communicate, but it's not. There's a fault in the communication. That's the. I think that's also the importance of understanding and learning different languages. Definitely want to start learning different languages for me myself. It's always been a thing, and I can. It is interesting that a lot of these philosophies that I wish to know and understand more have not been translated. They're very limited in translations. You know, certain things that seem to want to hold the view of the control systems, etc., always have translations go everywhere. So I just find that fascinating. So you know, just like when you see YouTube views and stuff like that, someone just all of a sudden get popular, translated into all these different languages. It's just very suspect. But like I always find it funny because if I do watch a YouTube that suggested a video and someone has a lot of views and they're just same things is always the same. Very narcissistic tendencies, very ego driven, very materially appealing, not just makeup and stuff, but also body wise. The captions, the titles, some words it'll be, you know, the clickbait stuff, you know, very clickbaity, very like self-important type of things. It's gonna be capital letters, entire words capital letters. Always gonna be supportive of some form of restricted freedom, controlled mechanism. Interesting to note that they always have British accents, English accents, very posh or whatnot. It's still funny because I still remember, and if you listen to me a long time, I still remember these are the daughter of a Persian grandmother who was very nice back in Redmond, Washington, and she was a real estate agent, and she would talk in a British accent, English accent, right? When she's working as just because there's just more. It's a conditioning thing, right? And you're gonna be more appeal to more people as refined and stuff like that. And then when she's talking to me and just other people like in private, she just uses her normal like Americanized accent type of thing. We don't really have accents, but we seem to have you know, it's the American English, not very hard as far as the way we speak. And it's not very appealing, right? But you never know if any of these egos on YouTube or whatever thing, if they're faking their accents. We know that they've been faking a lot of things, so accents could definitely be one of them, but that's not really looked into. There's just so many things out there. An idea occurred to me today based off of YouTube feed, and I may pursue it. A very similar concept. Who knows? Become the Robin Hood. type. In the new digital age, I guess you could say. Anyways, so much talking. My throat hurts. It's dry. I need to get some sleep. It's 3:10, 3:08, almost 3:10 here. So I'm gonna leave it at that. Anyways, I hope you have a good night. If you celebrate holy days, enjoy your holy days. I don't really celebrate, even though I participate. It's a little bit different, right? And I'm thinking of my father and mother and the old Korean paying respects to the ancestors, and the ceremonies that I remembered as a little kid that we used to do. I never liked it because I never understood it, but now that I understood it, I kind of want to partake in it again. The problem is I don't really know any of my ancestors. So how can I pay thanks to my ancestors if I don't know them? So that will be an interesting thing. And I may dive more into it as a topic on its own later on. So just keep in mind, there's a lot of topics I really like to go into. A lot of it has to do with research that I do want to do, just so I can show you the frame of mind of how I'm finding it, what the legitimate authority, official, however you want to see it, is spoken of, is written of, and then definitely want to try find the opposition. It's like, hey, what are the people not in authority that have always been subjugated saying about this thing, this idea, this philosophy, this religion, this individual, etc., and just get that opposing view. And most of my inclinations are going to be towards, again, the underdog. You know, I just find it ironic that we always root for the underdog, yet as far as control and freedom goes, we always root for the ones who are top dogs. Anyways, that's it for tonight. Thank you very much for listening and watching, and I'll see you another night.